Today is International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation, a global call to end a harmful practice that affects millions of girls worldwide. Nigeria has laws against FGM, but the reality is that it still happens in some communities, often in secret. On this year's commemoration, Miriam Daniels takes a look at the stories of survivors, expert perspectives, and the gains of behavioral change campaigns.
How do I join the womanhood? Said there are some rights that will be prepared, that will be carried out.
Despite cultural shifts and legal bans, some still believe in the practice, seeing it as a rite of passage for girls. In Akwa Ibom, campaigners say there is progress, but the battle isn't over. Health experts warn that female genital mutilation causes lifelong complications, from infections and childbirth risk to severe psychological trauma. Blessing Ibanga was just 16 years old and Destiny Ndifreke was 10 when they were separately subjected to genital mutilation in a village by their grandmothers. Years later, they still live with the trauma.
I laid down, and the lady brought out, one of the elderly women brought out razor blade, and my grandmother shouted at her, put back the razor blade, and my grandmother gave them a new razor blade. What I did not understand, that my mother ran away. My mother was there, but she ran away because she did not want to hear the sight. Of course, she knew about it. So I was like, what is this? So they laid me down, they cut off my private and poured dust. This dust they use in cooking with firewood, they pour the dust on it, then the next they now put kaika in their mouth and poured on it. I could feel the pain as a young girl, so it was not fun.
One woman came in, she held me, stretched my, my leg. They cut it. It was so painful. Blood came out heavily. So, but since I don't know the reason, or I don't know the reason why she did it. If it is now, I wouldn't have done it. No. Ntrike.
Despite Nigeria's 2015 ban on female genital mutilation, the practice persists. According to the United Nations, about 20 million Nigerian women and girls have undergone female genital mutilation, the highest number in Africa. In Akwa Ibom, study by Johnson et al. In Itu local government area placed prevalence at 92.7%, 69.8% occurring at ages 6 to 12. A source we spoke to said awareness campaigns in the state have yielded 60% behavioral change. Mr. Gabriel Advocacy is a psychologist. He speaks to us over the phone.
Implications of female genital mutilations are quite many, like shock and trauma. The tear, the wounds cause fear to the person. So there's shock and trauma.
So our traditional rulers and women in the society, especially in the interior part of the community, the women in the community, that please there should be an end to these practices because it has no benefits to the women and the girls, so rather it gives them harm.
Ukeme Ebu is an obstetric gynecologist at the University of Uyo Teaching Hospital. He speaks about the immediate and lifetime effects of female genital mutilation on girls and women's reproductive health.
The long-term complication will be painful menstruation because the orifice sometimes is sealed, so the menstruum cannot escape. Sexually, the woman will not enjoy sexual intercourse. That's why some women they will now develop loss of libido and what we call vaginismus, dyspareunia, like I said.
From survival to advocacy, today Blessing Ibanga is a lawyer. She speaks for victims of female genital mutilation. She states the legal implication of the practice.
Akwa Ibom State in 2020 enacted the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act of Akwa Ibom State, and by virtue of Section 6 of that
fight continues. Miriam Daniels, TVC News, Uyo, Akwa Ibom State.
An advocate for zero tolerance to female genital mutilation, Melanie Shala, joins me here in the studio for more. Good to have you here.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Is female genital mutilation still a thing? I mean, do people still engage in this practice?
I love this question. You know why I love it? I get it all the time. And you wouldn't blame people when they ask this. I feel like you have asked the most potent question, because you and I live in the cities, and then we just feel this is the big rich places. People don't do these things, but they do. Because this is a primarily culturally inspired tradition, and a culture of the people migrates with people. So as people leave their different communities, they simply form new communities where they've migrated to. And as a result of that, they simply look for new alliances that can ensure the perpetuation of that cultural practice. It's not just amongst us in Nigeria and as Nigerians. In 30 countries of Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, in other immigrant communities across the world, in Europe, in USA, in Australia, in Canada, anywhere and everywhere.
So I mean, it's still a thing across the world?
Oh yes, it is.
Do we have any specific figures for Nigeria, for instance?
Okay, so I do not think there is specific data for Nigeria, or it escaped me, but I'm going to speak to the generic data, and it's phenomenal. Today, Nigeria's population is 230, arguably, but the population of women living and girls alive today who have been mutilated stands at 230, according to World Health Organization.
Just 230 or 230,000?
I beg your pardon, 230,000 million. I do not know why I'm removing the million. The million is the most important part of this conversation, because it brings the magnitude, brings out the magnitude of, what we're talking about dealing with in female genital mutilation. And of these, since the years of the advocacy against the practice, and let me remind you that we are just 5 years to zero on bringing down female genital mutilation.
That's 2030, right?
2030, thank you so much. And so, as of this moment, we're only 30% down. So if we're 30% down at the rate and pace at which female genital mutilations practice is being stemmed, it then speaks to how all hands must, as of essence, maybe since like 3, 4, 5 years ago, should be on deck to ensure that we are hitting that goal, if anything. Of course, what you are doing is part of the biggest things that should be done. Can we carry on conversations today, tomorrow, every other time about it? But most importantly, can we have survivors come out to tell their stories? Because this practice, again, is entrenched in the culture of silence, the culture of shame. The culture is banking on you and I, not talking about our experiences.
You are a survivor, Melanie.
As a survivor.
Talk to us about your experience.
Not speaking, thank you so much, not being able to speak to the fact that I have been disenfranchised sexually as a woman because I was mutilated. Long before I could make a decision was made for me. And what was it? So she's a girl child. Oh, congratulations to us. And a couple of months down the line, I was disenfranchised, not just to my sexual power as a woman, but to several other rights that I have as a woman. My health right, my sexual health primarily, and then let's go to other rights. For example, it impacted me when I had my children through vaginal delivery. So you expect that the clitoris would help in enhancing the crowning of the baby's head during vaginal childbirth. But that power has been limited in some form because the clitoris is off. For some women, the labia minora is taken off. For some other women in other types, the labia majora is taken off. For some other women in type 3, infibulation, there is the sewing together of the labia majora, if it is not already cut off, to only leave a hole for urination, menstruation. And of course, this leads to menstrual pain, cramps, and what's not that we experience. The impact, if you are not already dead from the bed of being mutilated, goes from infection like sepsis, HIV and AIDS, HPV, and so on, right, to several other infections. And let's even talk of the psychosocial impact of that. How that it's said that most women who have been mutilated actually have to go through some adverse psychological impact, and rightly so. I speak of myself as a survivor, and I speak to not having known that I was mutilated except on my line of duty as a journalist when in 2019, I'd interviewed some journalists on radio. I was on Women Radio at that time, women advocates from CERWIN, Center for Women Health Initiative of Information Nigeria, where they spoke to a certain figure in Oyo State, and they said Kajala local government area in Oyo State at that time had a prevalence rate of FGM at 98%. This was driving home. Kajala local government area is next to my own local government area of origin in Oyo State. And that was when I found that my own people as well in Ibarakba had prevalence rates ranging from 67 to like 71%.
What you're talking about is very recent. Imagine growing up all the years and not even knowing this has happened.
I didn't know I was mutilated until I was 33.
So let's talk about what can be done in form of, policy change. What can government, what can individuals do?
Thank you. Thank you. You have my heart. So government has done something brilliant. The VAP Act was passed in 2015 by the Goodluck Jonathan administration. I think that was by far the biggest gift Goodluck Jonathan gave this country. Because indeed, how then could we talk about the right of a woman to hold her body intact because she was indeed born perfect? If there was no piece of legislation saying, indeed, it is a crime if you went ahead, right, to mutilate the girl child. So now, having done that, there needed to be another step, the domestication of this act. As of today, in the 36 states of Nigeria, let's add the FCT 37 by extension. I think we're about just 30 states of the country, maybe a little above, but the last I tracked, it was about 30 that have domesticated the act. And we still have a few more states to quickly jump on this and domesticate, but that's just the start of the process. Having domesticated, how about the implementation? As we speak, I'm yet to know of a lawsuit that speaks to charging on having mutilated my daughter, my niece, my nephew, rather, not nephew, but niece. I beg your pardon.
But who will take the responsibility when such happens?
So who's taking responsibility? The guardian, the parents, yes. Somebody needs to be put behind bars because this law, the way it's domesticated in a lot of places, let me speak to Oyo State, where there are two laws speaking to this, the VAL, and there's one other law like that speaking to the Child Act in the state, and they stipulated that if a girl child is mutilated, there is such thing as fine of about 100,000 naira or more, and equally jail term. This law needs to be tested. Right now, we have something like the Sexual Offenders Diary or something like that.
Yeah.
I believe we need to have a female genital mutilation, a mutilation offenders diary, so where we name and shame, thank you, where we name and shame people who do not want to agree that it is a fundamental right of a woman to be preserved just as is, just as she's born.
All right. All right, so we hope that this conversation would continue, not just on days like this, when we make the global call. Melanie Shalai is an advocate for zero tolerance to female genital mutilation. Thank you very much for sharing your story and for, bringing it to the public.
I've enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a whole lot.